Hello, Tim here. Welcome to my channel. In today's episode, being fall season coming up, thought it would be a fun project to do a pumpkin. And it was suggested to me to carve a wooden pumpkin. So that's what I did the other day. I sat outside. It took me kind of most of the afternoon to work on it, but it was very, very enjoyable, and I think you'd enjoy this too. So to start out with, we need to talk about the right kind of wood to work with. And I did cover that in a previous video, which will be a link to my favorite carving woods. In this particular case, what I did is I got a piece of white pine. And white pine is probably one of the softest woods you'll want to work with. This happens to have some blue stain in it from sitting in the forest floor, I guess, or when the tree was dead and they took it down after a while. But that adds some character to it. So when you're starting, you find a piece of wood, say from a fireplace or a branch. I think it's best to work with dry lumber. And wet is a little stringy, but it can carve easy. This is cut from the same piece of wood. And it's important to start with something that's going to be pretty much the finished length of what you want to carve. This is actually the same block of wood. And I cut this to length. And I wished in a way, I thought it would be kind of fun to have a curving vine off the top, because then you could hang it up or something if you wanted to. But this took so much time. And you'll see from the picture that I turned it on the lathe and it looked like a big mushroom, and I had to carve all that away, but the knot gave me a lot of trouble. So that's a little bit hard to carve. So I would plan accordingly. Got a knot going on here, so I'd kind of work around that, and there's a check here. So if you're going to work from a block of wood like this, it's best to get it shaped first. And I decided it might be better to make a shorter stem and not try to get so ambitious with carving a curved one. I still have more to take off. So in a moment, I'm going to show you some of the steps I did to get this far. Now, this one, the ribs, the divisions, I just eyeballed it, and I ended up counting 13 of them. This one, I used my index feature on my lathe. You can see in the picture that I stopped this every third increment, and I think I ended up with 16 divisions here, so it's all equal. I like a little more spontaneity. It might be a little too uniform. And whether I stay in the lines or not and that's entirely up to you. I don't want it to look like a furniture leg or something like that. So I'd get a little more random. And you'll see some of this was a little bit flat here on the piece. So pumpkins are just irregular shape. You can make it a little more rounded, a little more flat, a little taller, a little shorter. But I recommend starting with a small, say a grapefruit size or big tomato size piece of wood. The tools that I work with are some very standard ones that I talk about in my other videos. This is the Mora knife, and I have one gouge that I use, which helps quite a bit in shaping the ribs. And then the skew knife and just a rough cutting knife. These are flex cut, and I'll link to where you can get those. So let me show you how I start out. Pencil's pretty important. So I have these lines that I already predetermined, and they might be just a little too close together. I don't know. I might not keep it that way because it's a little too uniform. But I'm going to show you what I did here. So I did pencil lines, and when I started I like this knife to do the V cut. Now how deep you go with this is really going to be up to you. But this carves pretty easy. So once you get down to a, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch would be too deep. But just imagine none of the rest of this has been carved yet, and I'm starting a fresh line. So there's my line, and I'm just doing a basic V cut. In the middle, sometimes the skew chisel, you just want to be careful that you don't slip. But the skew chisel actually does a pretty good job in the middle here. And you want to get that line defined before you get up to the top here, so you kind of get that. Now I did this outside in my lap, sitting in a chair next to the fire pit. So if you're doing something like that, then I'd recommend wearing something or having a board or something on your lap so that something doesn't slip. It's a little, I did a little minor cut in my finger. You want to be careful of that. So I'm using the bench to kind of support that. Now when I come up to the top, I can tell I need to strop this. It's a little bit. Any knife you use, you got to keep sharpening it. Yeah, that's better. Now I've got this V groove here, and this is where the little gouge works. This is says a number 3, and this is a Swiss made. These are very useful tools. These are palm tools with the small handles like that, so you can kind of push them. You don't ever strike these with a mallet. You're strictly whittling. And this is how I got the kind of the convex surface all around. So when you eyeball it, you might end up crowding a little bit, which apparently I have up here some. But it's a folk art piece, so you can do whatever you want. So it's kind of going between these 4 tools. Now when I get to the final, you're coming uphill here or downhill, and you got to go the other way. You can't start here and go up because you'll tear it out. So you got to go downhill, work with the grain. And when I get done with this, I'll complete this a little bit later, but for purposes of demonstration, if you wanted to, this is a pretty useful tool. This is a sanding, a band sander, I guess you call it. They come in 1/2 inch size and 1/4 inch size, and I use these sometimes. If you want to take the little whiskers, little fragments off, I don't like to over sand any carvings, but this does clean it up nicely. So I'll link to where you can get these things, but I find these very useful little tools. Now I'll take more off the stem. I'm going to still leave it hooked, but this one I'm going to just leave it kind of a little short nub. This is this is actually antique pine, which is going to be a lot more difficult to carve than this. It's a little heavier, but it's going to look cool because it's it'll have that golden glow, pumpkin color when I put a finish on it. So sometimes when I can't decide how I want to finish something, I'll get it wet. This is just water, and that'll give me some idea what it'd look like with a clear coat. It kind of has a gourd type of appearance to it. Now that could just be left like that, or you could use an acrylic paint that's watered down or washed out. You could stain it in the stem, maybe a green color, but and my recommendation would be to keep it a little more translucent. Decide not to put a face on it or carve make it into a jack-o'-lantern. You could add a face on there if you wanted to, or leave it like it is. I think if you make a jack-o'-lantern, that's what it'll always be. If it's a pumpkin, you could add something to it at some point, but then it could be a Thanksgiving decoration or just a fall decoration. It wouldn't have to be necessarily representing Halloween. But that's it. I would encourage you to give it a go. It's not that hard, a few basic tools. And if you don't have a lathe, you just have to take your time to shape this round to get as close to this. Wouldn't have to even be symmetric, but get it as close as you can before you start carving the ribs or anything like that. But it's worth a try. It's fun. So thanks for watching. Please give it a thumbs up if you would, and please subscribe. And we'll see you next time.